She lived in a crumbling cottage on the edge of a vast forest, nurturing a wolf pup that would grow beyond anyone's wildest imagination. No one foresaw how their bond would lead to a final jaw-dropping act after her death, a moment that defied nature's boundaries. On a secluded strip of land by the old pine forest, rumors often swirled about an elderly woman named Agatha. Locals whispered that she dwelled alone among the towering pines, living on a modest pension and the occasional kindness of neighbors. Her home, a tumble-down cottage with a crooked chimney, stood as a testament to years of quiet independence. Many avoided the area altogether, half remembering superstitions about wild animals roaming those woods. Everything changed one winter, when a villager reported spotting Agatha accompanied by a small, scruffy wolf pup, hardly bigger than a house cat. The pup's bright yellow eyes, so characteristic of wolves, shocked passers-by. How could a frail old woman keep a wild creature as a companion? Some predicted disaster, while others wondered if pity or loneliness drove her to care for the orphaned pup. Despite the murmurs, Agatha persisted in raising the wolf, calling him Silver for his sleek, silvery fur. Over the years, Silver grew at an astonishing rate. Villagers glimpsed him bounding after Agatha on her rare trips to the market, looming so large that even dogs avoided crossing his path. Though many remained fearful, no reports arose of Silver showing aggression, only unwavering loyalty to his aged caretaker. When townsfolk dared approach, they'd see a massive wolf standing protectively by her side, ears perked, gaze watchful but not menacing. In hushed tones, people admitted a strange fascination with this unlikely pair, a bent-backed old woman forging a bond with a beast known for its primal instincts. Then, one autumn, the unthinkable happened. Agatha passed away quietly in her sleep, leaving behind her beloved wolf, an animal of immense size and unknown temperament. While neighbors prepared a modest funeral, they also fretted over what would become of Silver. Had her presence alone kept his wildness at bay? No one imagined that his next act, sparked by a grief too large for words, would shake the entire village to its core, revealing a devotion that transcended the line between human love and the call of the wild. When Agatha first discovered the wolf pup, she had been gathering fallen branches in the forest, keen to stockpile firewood for the harsh winter. A faint yowl had drawn her to a withered tree stump, where a tiny ball of trembling fur cried out, half covered in snow. Agatha's heart clenched at the sight, a creature likely orphaned, and too young to survive alone. Though her neighbors would have scoffed, calling it madness to adopt a wolf, she couldn't turn away from those pleading eyes. Carrying him back to her cottage, she laid the pup by the hearth, feeding him warmed goat's milk from a shallow dish. The pup responded with fragile trust, his thin tail attempting a wag. Agatha had seen enough winters to know the gravity of rearing a wild animal, yet something about the pup's vulnerability mirrored her own solitude, two forlorn souls overshadowed by a world that rarely made room for the weak. As weeks turned to months, the pup, christened Silver, recovered his strength. Agatha fashioned simple bedding from old blankets and introduced him to a schedule of regular meals, scraps of leftover stew, occasional bits of rabbit or fish. The pup devoured food with relentless hunger, limbs growing with uncanny speed. Despite warnings, she never tethered him outside. Instead, she coaxed him gently to accept her presence, brushing his fur and tending to minor cuts he picked up rummaging near brambles. Each little sign of affection the wolf returned, like softly placing a paw on her knee, eased the loneliness in Agatha's chest. Meanwhile, her nearest neighbor, a reserved farmer named Tobias, observed the changes at the cottage from afar. Once, while delivering a bag of potatoes, he spotted Silver curled near Agatha's rocking chair, head on her lap. Alarmed by the sheer size of the beast, Tobias offered to help rehome Silver to a nearby shelter that sometimes took exotic or wild animals. Agatha refused politely but firmly. "He's my family," she said. "We both have no one else." Tobias left, unsettled, but not wanting to meddle further. During her occasional market visits to town, Agatha would navigate the dusty streets with Silver, faithfully trailing behind. The wolf's presence unnerved shopkeepers, who eyed his massive form warily, hands twitching near broom handles or anything that might serve as a weapon if the beast lunged. But Silver never gave cause for alarm, merely observing the bustle with silent intensity. Over time, some softened enough to offer scraps of meat or bones, surprised at Silver's calm demeanor. Others, however, whispered rumors about the day the wolf's primal instincts would surface, dooming his elderly keeper. Through each season, the pair's bond deepened. At times, Silver roamed the edges of the forest, returning at dusk with a deer leg or a brace of grouse, which he dropped at Agatha's feet as if offering tribute. She'd pat his head, murmuring gratitude, though she seldom ate much game. Instead, she carefully cleaned and stored what she could, sometimes trading the meat in exchange for supplies from Tobias. In such acts, the village recognized Silver's predatory strength, but also marveled at his devotion, no mere pet, but a partner in their meager survival. Yet, as the years passed, Agatha's health declined. Stooped back, arthritic joints, and tired eyes made even routine chores a challenge. Silver, now a full-grown wolf of startling size, took on an almost guardian-like role. He'd stand watch in the yard, regal as a sentinel, ensuring no stray fox or menacing critter threatened his mistress. Neighbors who dared approach the cottage found themselves met by a towering figure of fur and fangs, silently warning them to keep distance unless they meant no harm. Behind closed doors, Agatha cherished the companionship that had staved off her isolation. She read aloud from old storybooks, her shaky voice weaving tales of knights, mythical beasts, and forests just as wild as their own. Sometimes, she'd imagine Silver understood every word, for he'd rest his head on her lap, ears flicking at her voice's cadence. Despite her outward calm, a growing worry gnawed at Agatha. Silver's future, if she was no longer around to guide him. She'd heard some townsfolk call him a monster behind her back, believing he'd become a threat the moment she died. Late at night, by lantern light, she would pray softly, hoping that if her time came, Silver would find refuge, not a lynch mob. She considered writing letters to distant relatives or to an animal sanctuary, but her limited resources and frail energy often waylaid such plans. Eventually, winter arrived in full force, winds howling across the forest canopy, snow piling high around the crooked cottage. Agatha coughed more frequently, her face drawn and pale. Silver hovered near her, occasionally nudging her blankets into place or letting out a low, mournful whine at her escalating frailty. One bitter evening, as she shivered despite the blazing hearth, Agatha gently touched Silver's muzzle, eyes brimming with both gratitude and sorrow. "You've kept me alive, you know," she whispered, voice trembling. Silver pressed closer, as if trying to warm her with his own body. Unbeknownst to neighbors who hardly saw her these days, Agatha sensed her end was close. She found solace in the fact that Silver was no longer the tiny pup she'd rescued. He was a majestic creature, capable of survival, if only the villagers and their superstitions would spare him. In the silent tension of that final winter, man and beast clung to a bond that transcended any notion of predator or caretaker, forging a partnership built on mutual dependence and fierce love. By the time the snow reached the windowsills, the question that lingered in the frosty air was how Silver would react if Agatha left him behind. Her fear wasn't for herself anymore, but for the future of the giant wolf she considered her only family. In that hush before the storm, no one in town could have predicted the staggering act that would unfold upon Agatha's passing, a display of loyalty so profound it would leave them speechless, rethinking every prejudice they'd harbored toward the old woman and her towering companion. As the frost-laden winter held the forest in its silent grip, Agatha's health deteriorated more sharply than anyone had expected. Her breath came in labored wheezes, and days passed where she never left the old rocking chair by the fire. Silver, the giant wolf whose strength and presence had grown with each passing season, rarely strayed from her side. Even when hunger pangs tugged at his belly, he only ventured out briefly, returning swiftly with whatever small game he could find. It was as if his wild instincts had shifted to accommodate this new reality. Protecting Agatha in her twilight was more important than roaming far. Sensing that Agatha might soon require more assistance than he could provide alone, Tobias, the neighboring farmer, tentatively began visiting the cottage. Though apprehensive about Silver's sheer size and lupine stare, He forced himself past the wolf's watchful scrutiny. Agatha's grateful smile each time Tobias set down a basket of bread or fresh milk reminded him that compassion wasn't just for the able-bodied. Watching the wolf follow Agatha's every gesture with worried eyes unsettled him, yet also sparked a begrudging respect. "He acts more like a devoted hound than a beast," he once told his wife, "but I still can't say I trust him completely." Yet, for all Tobias's visits and silent prayers, Agatha's vigor dimmed. On a frigid morning, she finally confided in him, a broken whisper as she lay in bed, the wolf at her feet. "I know I don't have much time," she confessed, her voice weak. "My greatest fear is not death, but what becomes of Silver when I'm gone." Moved by her plea, Tobias promised he would see to it the wolf was treated fairly, though he privately doubted how the village would react. Many still viewed Silver as a ticking menace. A wolf, especially one so large, had no place in their quiet settlement. If rumor spread that Agatha was gone, would they rally to chase Silver away, or worse? Meanwhile, Lily, a curious teenager from town, learned of Agatha's failing health through gossip at the local bakery. Intrigued by stories of a wolf that defied nature's usual boundaries, she resolved to visit. One afternoon, ignoring her mother's warnings, Lily ventured down the snow-packed road to the crooked cottage. As she approached, the wolf emerged from behind a drift, towering and silent. Lily's heart raced. She'd never been this close to a creature so formidable, yet the wolf merely stood, ears pricked, tail low in cautious curiosity. Sensing no threat in the girl, Silver allowed her to knock on the door unchallenged. Agatha, coughing into a threadbare blanket, beckoned Lily in with a gentle wave. Over the next hour, Lily helped Tobias tidy the cluttered living space and brew a mild tea that Dr. Braxton had recommended. The wolf watched closely but remained calm, as though accepting Lily as part of the small circle of kindness surrounding his ailing companion. Lily's eyes often drifted to Silver's mesmerizing stare, both captivated and uneasy. Later, she confided in her friends that she'd never felt such a profound aura from any creature, describing it as like he knows everything we're feeling. As Agatha's strength waned, her bond with Silver appeared to intensify. Some nights, villagers reported hearing low, mournful howls from the direction of her cottage, as if the wolf sang lullabies to ease her pain. In return, Agatha patted his colossal head, whispering endearments that no one else would ever comprehend. "You saved me from loneliness," she told him once, and voice trembling, "and I tried to save you from the cold. We've done well, haven't we?" The wolf would respond with a gentle nudge, laying his head on her lap. Despite such tender moments, the tension in the village escalated. Whispers circulated about what might happen when Agatha passed. Some insisted Silver should be put down for public safety, citing age-old fears about wolves turning on humans. Others, swayed by Tobias's reluctant praise and Lily's enthusiastic stories, argued that the wolf displayed more loyalty than some domestic dogs. Factions formed, each passionately certain of their stance. Unbeknownst to them, a silent clock ticked down to Agatha's final breaths, rendering their debates heartbreakingly moot. One bitterly cold night, the first starless sky in weeks, Agatha slipped away in her sleep. Tobias found her the next morning, having come by to deliver warm soup. She lay peacefully under a worn quilt, as if merely dozing, while Silver stood guard at the bedside. Something in the wolf's posture, a droop of his shoulders, the desolate gleam in his eyes, spoke of a heart-wrenching grief beyond mere animal instinct. Tobias, voice catching, announced her passing to the few assembled neighbors who gathered outside upon hearing the news. They entered the cottage with caution, half expecting the wolf to lunge. Instead, they saw him pressed against the bed, muzzle resting near Agatha's cold hand. In the days that followed, the village prepared a modest funeral, only a handful attending the burial. To keep watch over the coffin and the ceremony, Silver sat at a distance, silent, massive, eyes locked on the proceedings, as if expecting to see Agatha rise once more. Some were unnerved by his presence, others quietly moved by the display of devotion. When the coffin was finally lowered into the frozen ground, the wolf loosed a long, sorrowful howl that echoed across the snow-blanketed fields. making every spine tingle. Even those who feared him felt tears well up at the raw sorrow in that cry. At first, they expected the wolf to wander off, returning to the forest from which he came. Yet Silver remained, circling the fresh grave, refusing to leave. A wave of uncertainty swept through the villagers. Should they chase him away, forcibly capture him for a distant sanctuary, or respect his mourning? Lily, tears streaking her cheeks, stood vigil beside Tobias, watching in awe as Silver lay at the foot of the grave, as though he might keep Agatha company in death just as he had in life. Thus, at the height of this communal grief and debate, the stage was set for the wolf's most astonishing act, a gesture so profound and unexpected that it would challenge every assumption about a wild animal's capacity for love and loyalty. In the hush of that winter cemetery, those who had doubted Agatha's bond with Silver came face to face with the unthinkable. The giant wolf had not only lost his only friend, but now grappled with a sorrow that spoke of true devotion, bridging a gap between species that no one had imagined could be crossed. The question on every trembling lip was the same: what would the wolf do next? In the days following Agatha's burial, the village found itself in the grip of a collective unease. Neighbors exchanged uneasy glances each time they passed the simple wooden cross marking her grave on the outskirts of the small cemetery. Perched a few yards away, Silver, the giant wolf, kept a silent, unwavering vigil. From dawn till dusk, and often through the night, he refused to leave the site, regardless of the biting cold or drifting snow. Some villagers, moved by the display of loyalty, left scraps of meat or bowls of water nearby. Others warned it was too dangerous to let a wild predator roam freely, especially one grieving and potentially unpredictable. As a gentle snowfall dusted the graves one afternoon, Lily ventured to the cemetery with a bag of leftovers and a nervous heart. She expected to see Silver coiled in sorrow, his massive form half buried in the snow. Indeed, there he was, fur ruffled by the wind, muzzle resting on his paws, gaze never straying from Agatha's final resting place. His silent mourning struck Lily with a mix of awe and pity. Approaching slowly, she offered him a piece of cooked chicken. Silver stared at her, then let out a low, throaty whine. Instead of devouring the food, he nudged it aside, as if nothing mattered in the wake of Agatha's absence. A pang gripped Lily's chest. If he wouldn't eat, how long before hunger or heartbreak claimed him? Word of Silver's refusal to move from the grave soon circulated around town, prompting debates about how to intervene. Tobias, the farmer who'd often brought groceries to Agatha, argued for capturing the wolf and relocating him to a sanctuary far from the village. "He's pining away," he reasoned, shaking his head in concern. "We can't let him starve out there." Others insisted that forcibly removing him was both dangerous and cruel. Dr. Braxton, who had once visited Agatha's cottage, proposed a gentler approach, gradual coaxing with food and calm voices, hoping to lure Silver to warmer quarters. But each attempt at persuasion proved futile. The wolf remained steadfast, rejecting all efforts to lead him from the grave. Amid this standstill, the first major twist took hold. A group of local youths, skeptical about the wolf's supposed gentleness, planned to scare Silver off themselves. Late one night, they arrived at the cemetery armed with flashlights and the bravado of teenage daring. Their intention was to spook the wolf into fleeing, perhaps to prove themselves or quell their own fears. Yet, as they advanced, hollering and shining beams of light at the imposing silhouette, the air around them seemed to grow electric. Silver rose onto all fours, muscles coiled, fangs glinting in the flicker of moonlight. A menacing growl rumbled in his chest, a sound so deep it reverberated through the cold ground beneath their feet. The youths froze in terror. Though none were physically harmed, the wolf's warning was unmistakable. They scattered, adrenaline surging, stumbling back to the village with tales of an enormous demon glaring them down. The next morning, rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed the wolf was possessed by Agatha's spirit, protecting her grave from trespassers. Others insisted it was merely an animal, dangerously fixated on a spot that reeked of human scent. Tobias, upon hearing of the boys' failed stunt, chastised their recklessness, but took the incident as proof that action was needed. Silver, in his grief, might lash out more severely next time. The second revelation that followed was even more startling. A traveling peddler who'd paused at the cemetery out of curiosity reported witnessing the wolf in the early pre-dawn hours. According to the peddler, Silver had been seen gently pawing at the soil of Agatha's grave, as though attempting to excavate it. He wasn't trying to unearth her, the peddler insisted, his tone half fearful, half awed, but more like he was, I don't know, tidying the site. Feared's madness, but that's what it looked like. The mental image of a wolf painstakingly smoothing over the earth, as if paying final respects, sent shivers through those who heard the tale. To some, it was a powerful testament to the bond between woman and beast. To others, it confirmed the wolf had strayed into unnatural territory, a threat that defied normal wildlife behavior. Agitated villagers convened a somber meeting in the local church hall. Tension filled the modest space, heated whispers echoing off whitewashed walls. Some demanded immediate action, to drive the wolf away, reasoning that an animal which mourned a human grave was a sign of an unnatural bond that could only end in violence. A few voices, including Lily's, rose in protest, insisting that Silver's loyalty was neither dark magic nor an omen,